Welcome to today's Committee of the Whole meeting. For any of you that would like to speak during the Boyd Forum, the microphone's unusually loud today. Just me. Anyway, there should be a yellow slip in the back for you to fill out. Just hand that to the clerk, and we'll give you 1 minute to speak on pretty much any topic you want. Are there anybody for the Boyd Forum? Seeing none, that moves us to Council Actions, Appointments, Environmental Advisory Board. I may need some help from the clerk on this one. We may have a problem with the top one. Is we were notified that Mr. Kirchensfeld would not be able to serve because of his function with the county and them taking this. You want to explain it, Ms. Burnett?
The county will be providing some administrative services, and Mr. Kirchensfeld would have to resign. And he is on he's an incumbent, and he indicated that he would like to serve again, so he's automatically on the ballot. But we'll have to consider if you want to even appoint him or whatever you'd like to do. There is one other nominee for that position.
So in other words, because Mr. Kirchensfeld is going to be part of the administrative staff handling environmental affairs for the city, per the agreement that we have with the Escambia County, is that he should be ineligible for this, which would leave us with the default of Ms. Heyer, who's also nominated for another position here on the on the committee. My recommendation is, until we get a chance to talk to Mr. Kirchensfeld, is let's just hold up the vote on that one particular item there, and then vote for the rest of the ballot down, and we could hold that open later. Ms. Myers.
Well, I think that would present a problem in terms of the vote for the members at large, because Rebecca Heyer is on that one too. So I mean, if if it's something that's set in stone that he's not going to be able to serve on this committee, I think we should go forward with the vote, because on quite a few of these we only have one person anyway.
Okay, that's fine with me. I just wanted to offer that up, though.
Okay. And if I may, Mr. President, in talking with the county and bringing them into their new role as assisting the city, it was understood that he would not be a member of this particular committee, because okay, frankly, he may be assuming that as part of his staff responsibilities.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Well, then, just fill out the ballot, and then the clerk will collect those. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Stevenson.
Pardonnez-moi. I'm so sorry to just insert myself, but before y'all vote.
Yes.
I sent a message to Ms. Major this morning, and unfortunately, I'm sure that information didn't get to you. I have a concern in that the ordinance indicates that we had 7 members, and at a later date, the council voted to add 4 more members at large. And I presume that was to give flexibility and fluidity in the event that we couldn't get the 7 members who were to be selected from various and sundry fields of expertise. I don't know, but here's the other item on that subject, which is attendance. We're supposed to be willing to serve again if we wish, and also if we exhibit good attendance in our exhibiting our duties and handling our duties. And in certain instances, that has not taken place. I know of one in particular where the person never comes to the meetings, and that person happens to be fulfilling one of those specific 7 slots, being from a university. And somehow or other, I just don't think that's that we should ignore that. I think we should have more fluidity or vote to create more fluidity or amend the ordinance with more fluidity and not be bound by those strict 7 definitions of membership criterion, for lack of a better way to call it. Like, I'm in real estate. We had one from the university. We had different ones, descriptions.
Well, let me recommend this. We have a list here to vote on, and anybody that wants to speak, you know, in their favor, certainly I need to give them the opportunity to do that. So just go ahead and vote. And my advice would be is let the EAB come up with a recommendation for us to offer that fluidity that you're talking about.
And just let this ride for the moment and then change that person in the middle of the term?
If the attendance, I believe, don't we have attendance requirements for these boards that if they don't make so many meetings?
I don't think it,
Yeah, yeah.
I couldn't hear, I'm so sorry. Not that it matters for me, but this person, what I'm saying is, we have so many applicants right now for at-large, yet this person's, we have no other applicants for this person's position.
I understand. And again, I just encourage you to go through the Environmental Advisory Board and have them give us a recommendation.
I being one of them.
Okay.
Okay, will do. But I'm worried that one of our other Environmental Advisory Board persons will lose a position, and we could have fixed that right here and now. But if that's what I need to do, then I'll just wait and handle it later, and thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Myers.
Yes, Mr. President. I share the same concerns, and I do think that those are issues that need to be addressed, and I think that what we need to do is get the Environmental Advisory Board up and running. It meets this week on the 22nd, and we will be looking to the Environmental Board to bring us, you know, recommendations. And so I think that the recommendation that you are suggesting is certainly an appropriate recommendation to bring forth to City Council. I do want to speak in favor of the two people that I nominated. One is Rebecca Heyer. She has demonstrated an incredible commitment to getting this Environmental Advisory Board up and running again. It hasn't met since March of last year, in spite of my efforts to get it up and running again. She has been down to City Council numerous times urging us to get this board up and running. I would strongly support her nomination for the resident of the city slot. I had also nominated her for member at large, but her name will be the only name under the resident of the city. I would also like to speak in favor of another person I nominated, Rand Hicks, who lives in District 2 in the Pine Glades community, and he lives very close to Carpenter Creek. He's been very active in bringing problems regarding Carpenter Creek to the attention of public officials. He's been down to City Council urging council to, or the Environmental Advisory Board when it was meeting, to look at the health of that creek. Carpenter Creek is very important to this city. It meanders through a large part of the city, and it flows into Bayou Tahar. And so he has exhibited a lot of interest in this particular issue and the Environmental Advisory Board. He has been down to City Council and the Environmental Advisory Board and urged this board to to be very active. So I think he would be a great asset and a very active member. So I urge your support for Mr. Hicks.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. President, I just have a question about the ballot. There's another nominee that Mr. Gerald's nominated, Jeff Broderson, and I don't see him on the ballot. Has his name been withdrawn?
I've got two different ballots here. That was,
I got two ballots.
One.
You were discriminated
Yeah.
against.
He should be under business organization, right? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we had all of our options.
No, he's not. What's his name?
Jeff Broderson.
Jeff
It's
Broderson.
online, but not on the one in front of us.
It's not on mine.
Could you just
Need
write
to-
that in there, please?
How do you
And that-
spell his name?
Well, Jeff, I'm going to guess is
No, it's
Jeff.
And what
Jeoff.
cat-
Oh, is it really?
P-O-F-F, B-R-O-D-E-R-S-E-N.
And what category does he fall under?
Member of a
Business.
business organization. Okay, next on the list is Mr. Peter Domes. He's an incumbent, desires to be reappointed. Is Mr. Domes here?
How do you spell that?
Anybody wish to speak in his behalf? Chastity Hobbs. Mr. Gerald's, Jeff Broderson, would you like to speak in his behalf?
Yes, I'd like to know, thank you, Mr. President, if Mr. Broderson is here this afternoon.
Mr. Broderson?
Apparently not, but he is one of our local attorneys, and we've had a brief conversation, but he did express a serious and a profound interest in the environmental conditions of the city of Pensacola, and certainly he is willing to serve.
I just did it out.
And that's about all I know about him, except that he has some interest in environmental issues. And as a resident of the city of Pensacola, I believe that he would certainly be qualified to fill that role.
All right, thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I just have a quick question on the nominations. I noticed there's some that are in the portion up top for a specific nomination. They're also in the at-large portion.
Like with Ms. Heyer?
Right, so, but Mr. Broderson, could he automatically be an at-large as well, or how did that nomination occur? Would that have to be his application stating at-large as well?
He
Just
was
for
a
the
business
business?
organization
Only?
only, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So Mr. Domes, Joe Leppo. And Mr. Hicks, you've already spoken on his behalf, Ms. Myers. He's a neighbor of mine, and I support him as well, and I also nominated Ms. Heyer. Blair Stevenson. You're an incumbent. Would you like to speak again?
Not exactly, but I'd be thrilled to serve again.
Okay, good.
Thank
All right, thank you. Ms. Eleanor Godwin, incumbent. Ms. Godwin, would you like to speak?
Thank you, President Hall and council members. I'm Eleanor Godwin. I'm an incumbent with the EAB in the at-large category, and I'm happy to continue my service to the city if you so approve. I bring experience and community relationships to the board via the Biotahar Foundation. I'm currently a board member and the secretary of that organization. I'm a former environmental planner with the West Florida Regional Planning Council, staff for the Bay Area Resource Council, and a former member of the Clarinda Triangle Association, which was the TAG grant recipient from EPA for the Escambia Treating Company Superfund site. I provided environmental education throughout the community since 2000. I've attended and actively participated in all but 2 meetings during my tenure, and I currently serve as the vice chair. I feel that dependability and responsibility is very important in this position. If staffing continues to be a roadblock through the city, I would happily volunteer to do either agendas or record minutes for these meetings. I know that's been a problem in the past, as I believe in the strength and the usefulness of this organization to council. I think I speak for most current board members saying that we wish to be an active and viable resource for this council. I bring a passion for the city and its environment to this board and would appreciate your vote of confidence. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ms. Myers.
Yes, I just want to support Ms. Godwin's nomination, and also Blair Stevenson and Peter Domes, and I think you all have done a great job
Thank you.
and have a lot of commitment to the
Ms. Sire.
cause.
Yes, sir.
I would just want to ditto what Councilman Myers so aptly said.
Thank you.
Rebecca Heyer. I'm very gratified that I've been nominated. I have a lot of enthusiasm about the Environmental Board as a involved citizen. I have a background in environmental issues. I have a degree in economics, and I worked in the energy industry for about 10 years on evaluation of properties that are used in minerals exploitation. So I have some familiarity with doing evaluations, and I also worked in the communications industry as a consultant for many years, developing databases. I have worked in the volunteer sector as well as a secretary, and I have good organizational skills, not so good public speaking skills, but I will speak up when I need to. I will be happy to contribute to the organization in any way I can, taking notes. I would certainly enjoy having other people working in the same area. I don't want to take all of that on myself if I don't have to, but I'm willing to support, to provide whatever support is needed to keep the board active and fulfilling its charter.
Thank you, Ms. Heyer. Ms. Myers.
Yes, and I just want to thank you for supporting me and my efforts to get the board up and running again. You've been a great support. I appreciate all the times you've been down here to the City Council.
You've already spoken to Rand Hicks. Ms. Myers, Rand's not here. Debbie Hitchcock.
Well, I'm an incumbent as well. I'm an environmental engineer with over approximately 20 years of experience. I've been a city resident for over 15 years, and I have a good attendance record. And I'm really involved. This is truly a passion of mine, too. I like to contribute. I think we have a lot to offer, and we can truly give back to the city. So
Thank you.
I want to continue.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Heather Reed. Michael Smith. Then I nominated a gentleman I just met Thursday, Michael Zdunik, and his application is in your package. And Mr. Zdunik. No? Okay. I think the ballot's pretty self-explanatory. I know it's a little awkward having people in two different places to vote for, but I'd hesitate to have us remove anybody from the second of the two places in case they didn't make it on the first round. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I apologize for my lateness. I got all the way here and had forgot my computer, so I had to turn around and go home and get them. But I believe Mr. Kurtzenfeld has been removed because of some association with, have you already gone through all that?
We've already gone through that, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Disregard.
Okay, so just fill out your ballot, sign it, and the clerk will collect. Thank you.
Do we have information on him? Okay.
So Chastity's out of it? Or she's still in it? Okay, well, that's who I was. remembered that,
His
but not my...
dealer?
Yeah. Ibuprofen. I remembered that, but not my computers. And somebody else signed what remembered what they needed.
We can move on to Mayor communications and actions.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first thing on our agenda is the FY 2011 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, otherwise known as the CAFR. Recommendation is that City Council accept the City of Pensacola Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for the year ended September 30th, 2011, as prepared by the Financial Services Department and the Independent Auditor's Report issued thereupon. And at this point, Mr. Barker will make a presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds, Mr. President, and members of City Council. This is the financial report for September 30th, 2011. The first thing I want to do is to introduce my staff, if I could, and introduce the auditors. And the first person I want to introduce is Pam Childers. And Pam, if you just want to stand up. I'm sure most of the council knows you, but Pam is the financial services manager. She's also a CPA, and she leads on this from the city staff standpoint. With her is Amber McClure and Laura Picklap, who are both CPAs on staff, who do the work in order to put the document together that was presented to you. And then here from the audit firm, Saltmarsh Cleveland & Gunn, is Greg Story, who is the senior manager out in the field with us, and the other is David Lister, is a shareholder of Saltmarsh Cleveland & Gunn, and Greg and David will have a presentation after I complete mine. The first thing I always look for and tell council every year is to look for the auditor's report to see how we came out and see if we received a clean opinion. We have this year, and that's found on page 21 and 22 of the audit report. And then this, for 30 years, we have received the Certificate of Achievement of Excellence in Reporting from the GFOA. And that is, you say in 30 years, do they just pass you? They don't. This takes a lot of effort in order to get this each year and specific criteria that needs to be met. And then just to review the report itself for you, as it's laid out, is the letter of transmittal, is a communication to the council on mostly non-financial information as it relates to the city, its accomplishment, future plans, and those type of things, and that's on page 1 through 16. The next is the independent auditor's report, which I mentioned on 21, 22. Then the management discussion and analysis, which can be found on 23 and through 41, and for those council members that enjoy numbers and comparison of numbers, this compares actual numbers fiscal year 2010 with fiscal year 2011 with commentary on those numbers and the results of operation. This is unlike the quarterly reports, except for the fourth quarter report. In the quarterly reports, historically, I am discussing budget the current year that we're in. I do give council the budget schedules for the previous year, and there is some comparison, but most of the time in that I am focusing on budget to actual and how we come out. There really should be no surprises for council as you review the MD&A. Most of those material items are mentioned in the quarterly report as we go through the year. And then in the final analysis that I prepare in September of the quarterly report, it sort of sums up how we end it, and all that is before audit. And then you have your audit here. The rest of the document itself are the basic financial statements and notes there too, on page 42 through 113, and then the required supplementary information, mainly your pension data on page 114 through 117, your combining statements and schedules on 118, 147, and then the statistical section is at the end of the report beginning on 148. The significant events that were mentioned in the audit report and the letter of transmittal, mainly on page 15, it deals with pensions. I know that the members of this council have been dealing with pensions since 2005, when at a budget session that we had, that the council at that time directed us to look at pensions, and we are continuing to look at pensions and report on pensions each year, which resulted in, with the new form of government, the mayor appointing a pension advisory committee to review our defined benefit plans, and then additional information and action that council took, voted in 2010 to deal with some of the cost issues as it relates to personnel, including pension, was to reduce leave balances and reduce maximum leave payouts. Council actually took action to work into the collective bargaining agreements and implementation of 5-year averaging and reducing the spousal benefits. Those have not been implemented yet, but as the union contracts come up, the discussion is had with the union representatives on those. And then one thing that did occur for 9/30/2011, all the plans had the actuarial report. The mayor office had requested that the actuarial reports not be approved until the union contracts, which all expire this year on 9/30/2012, are reviewed, and the plan is to, of course, review that pension data that we received with the unions. Some of the highlights of that is that the unfunded liability increased for all the plans, all three of them, general, fire, and police, by $37.5 million. It went from $17.2 million to $116.7 million. And then what that means, beginning in fiscal year 13, had the reports been approved, that it would be an additional contribution by the city of $2.6 million into the pension funds. And then the funded levels, as were reported in the reports, which were not approved by the boards, that the general was 66% funded, the fire 84.4%, and the police 61.6%. So although this doesn't have a direct effect on fiscal 11, in the letter of transmittal, there's a whole page on the comments as it relates to the pensions, the union contracts, and the discussions that will occur in those union negotiations as it relates to pensions. Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Barker, do we have any idea where we're going to find this additional $2.6 million? Have we identified any sources?
No, sir. There's been no sources identified at this point, and as I said, had those reports been approved, then that is something that we'd be looking forward to as a contribution, and as the mayor's office works with the unions through the union negotiations, the outcome of that will be what would be required to be funded.
And if I may, Councilman Johnson, the bottom line is absent action to change that, that would be $2.6 million that we currently have for people and programs in the general fund, whether it be parks, whether it be fire coverage, whether it be police coverage, whether it be anything else that we fund, we would have to find that $2.6 million out of that. So it's a significant issue.
Right, so it'd be a reduction of services will be...
Correct.
Correct, I understand too. Thank you.
And then some of the financial highlights, you will not find this chart in the CAFR anywhere, but these are numbers that have been pulled out that I reflect every year to sort of give you a comparison of where we've been and what's happening. On the governmental fund side, the assets have increased by about $7.5 million. Liabilities have increased by about $3.5 million. To provide for a net asset change for the positive to $11.1 million. On the business side, there's a different story, and if you remember the quarterly reports, we discussed the airport and the ESP issue as it related to their assets, cash balances in those quarterly reports. And this is a reflection, as we have the audited numbers, of how it resulted. In our business type, enterprises, it's all the enterprises, but the main that had the effect on these numbers were the airport and ESP. The assets were down by $6.8 million. The liabilities were down by about $2.8 million, which resulted in about a $4 million net asset negative change, reduction in those net assets. And then on the revenue side, governmental funds, the revenues were increased in total about $3.9 million. And that was mainly due to special grants, funds that we had received, some donations and transfers as it relates to the Community Maritime Park. And on the operating expenditure side, they increased by $5.6 million. There again, it was due to the special grants, some stormwater capital projects, and interest payments on the 2009 redevelopment revenue bonds, which were effect of the Maritime Park.
Mr. Barker, does
Yes.
that include the depreciation? Because I know we have to do a balanced budget every year. That's one of the state requirements, and clearly revenues are well under expenditures. So is that there's some other number in there that we take in consideration when we have that budget?
Certainly, when you do your budget, fund balances in these funds are considered. So like in your local option sales tax fund, if you recall, we pull down those balances, and I have a specific slide breaking that out so that council can see.
Okay. Because we do have a balanced budget usually.
Yes,
yeah.
This is reporting the revenue and expenditures, okay? And then on your budget, especially in the general fund, now these are all your governmental funds, not just general fund, but in your general fund, we balance off our revenues with expenses. As long as you do that, you've heard me say it before, you'll stay in good financial condition. When you start pulling down your fund balances for other than capital projects and those type of things that we have built fund balances for, then that's where issues start coming in. And on our business type funds, for the enterprise funds, you see about the same item as the change in your assets that I showed you before. Revenues are down by $4.6 million and operating down by $3.4 million. Those are mainly due because of airport and ESP. The biggest being the ESP. And this sort of breaks out the enterprises for council. In that first column, operating income before depreciation, all of them are positive figures. When you add the depreciation in, like you mentioned, Councilwoman Pratt, there are losses there, all except for the utility fund. And that's historical. We show you the numbers for 10 also. And then as it relates just to the general fund balances, if you recall, when I did my September report in December of this year, the fund balance categories all changed, so I will not repeat all that, but there is a write-up in the audit report about that and what those categories are. But just to point out to you some of those balances, the unrestricted fund balance is $10,700,000, and that's made up of the council reserve, which is $7,669,000, and that's just a title of where we put that money for the reserve that's set up by policy of the city council. And then the park purchases account is $40,936 at the end of the year. Tree Landscape Trust Fund is $678,720, and those numbers were as of 9/30. I've already presented to council the quarterly report for the first quarter of this year and reported those balance changes to the city council. And then assigned fund balance is $1,019,000. An unassigned fund balance is $1.3 million. And just to mention that this is the last year, fiscal year 12, of the debt that we will be accumulating dollars for. The next payment on that debt as it relates to the general fund is 10-1 of 12, and dollars will be accumulated during fiscal year 12 for that payment that occurs in fiscal year, on the first day of the fiscal year 13. The local option sales tax and stormwater capital fund, just to show you the cash balances, which are relatively the same in both funds, but as you get down to the unrestricted fund balance at the end, you notice that there's a negative unrestricted fund balance as it relates to the local option sales tax projects. And as mentioned in the quarterly reports to council, that we moved a few projects forward that affects that fund balance number, and most of that are encumbrance obligations that we had at the end of the year. And as time goes by, as I mentioned, at some point when we pay out for the projects and the resource centers and those type of things that we're building, we will most likely have to use the city's pool cash. At one point, I would not be surprised that that cash balance would be negative, but we may need to draw upon the city's pool cash, and you'll see a negative there at some point in the future. Then some of the capital assets, I won't go through all of them. They are listed in the CAFR, but as your business type, the majority of those were your airport, booking of your airport items with the normal utility improvements of about $1.6 million. And then our general government activities, stormwater, street and sidewalk capital improvements of $5.8 million, and you can read the rest there. And these are specifically listed in the CAFR. And then just ending with the pension slide that I do each year. Now 2001 and 2002 are not on there because we just show a 10-year comparison, but both of those had big losses too. I think it's about $18 million change in net assets negative for each of those first 2 years, some positive years. Of course, 2008, the market, we're all aware of that, and there was $38 million worth of losses. Recognize there are a couple of years of good positives, and then in 2011 about $9 million worth of losses. And as I mentioned before, that's something that the unions and the mayor's office will be discussing. And with that, if you have questions, I'll be glad to answer them, and then the auditors will have a presentation also.
Ms. Myers.
I didn't have my hand up, but I will now. I was just wondering if you could send me a copy of your PowerPoint.
I will.
Before the council meeting Thursday night.
I'll be glad to.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I will send it to you separately. It is in what went out to council. It's with the agenda. If you get through all the CAFR, both the auditors and my presentations there, but if you'd still like it sent separately, I can.
I'd appreciate it.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So I don't have to go all the way through all those about 100 pages or so.
It is. It's long. I'll be glad to send them separately.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, sir. And you're going to have Mr. Story and good, come on up. Yeah. Just for the committee here, as I've moved number 10 up, following number 2.
Do you have the results of the vote?
Oh, yeah.
Any of these people? While they get settled?
Congratulations, Ms. Heyer. She was elected resident of the city. Mr. Domes, re-elected local environmental organization. Ms. Chastity Hobbs, re-elected to business organization. Mr. Lepo. And Mr. Niger returns. Neighborhood or Civic Association. Ms. Blair Stevenson. And then we have Ms. Eleanor Godwin, Debbie Hitchcock, Heather Reed, and Michael Smith returning. Thank you. Congratulations. Oh, Mr. Story.
Hey, Mr. Hall. Thanks for having us back to present the audit, and we discussed the audit with you in an interview conference before we started the audit, and we're back here now to present the results at the end of the audit. My name is David Lister. I'm the shareholder in charge of the audit, and with me is Greg Story, the senior manager responsible for actual conduct of the audit. We'll go through our presentation fairly briefly, but if you have any questions, feel free to stop me as we go along. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have. We'll be covering some required communications that are covered in a letter that's in your PDF packet for the agenda on page 220, but I'll just go through it verbally now, and if you read the letter later and have any questions, feel free to contact us. One of the required communications has to do with our responsibilities under the auditing standards, and to make a clear-cut distinction that the financial statements are the responsibility of management, and that we're responsible simply for auditing the financial statements and expressing an opinion on those financial statements. And also, just to clarify, we are reporting to council and are working on behalf of council when we conduct the audit. Of course, as we do the audit, we're necessarily working with staff to do the audit, but our reporting responsibility is to council, and we ultimately are accountable to council when it comes to reporting the results of our audit, any questions that you may have. In addition to the financial statements, we cover internal control. We're not expressing an opinion on your system of internal control, but we do evaluate control to the extent necessary for us to plan and conduct the audit. Same thing with your compliance with laws and regulations. We're not expressing an opinion on your compliance with laws and regulations, but we would bring anything to your attention that we discovered in our audit that would be a material instance of non-compliance. Also are required to talk to you about any new accounting pronouncements that may have taken effect during the past year. And the one item that Mr. Barker talked about briefly in his presentation is GASB Statement 54, dealing with your fund balance classifications. And there is some discussion of that in the CAFR on page 89, and I won't bore you with all the details right now, but I do understand that is a significant change in accounting, a significant new policy that was implemented during the past year. There also are some significant management estimates in the financial statements. Some amounts are fairly definite, such as your bank balances, but there are going to be line items in the statements that necessarily involve a lot of subjectivity, a lot of estimates. The three things that we're pointing out here are your self-insurance liabilities. The city has engaged a third-party administrator to help in developing those estimates of liabilities under your self-insurance program. Your allowance for doubtful accounts obviously depends on economic conditions and collectability of accounts, especially in the gas system, and that is something that's developed in-house by management. And the last thing we discuss here is your other post-employment benefits liability. That involves the calculation by an actuary. It's very complicated as far as addressing issues of mortality, turnover, future health care costs, so obviously that's a very, very soft number in your financial statements. A few other things we are required to talk about is if we had any audit adjustments, we would be bringing that to your attention. We have no significant audit adjustments for the 2011 audit, so there's nothing to bring to your attention. We also would be discussing any uncorrected misstatements that may be in the financial statements where we would discover errors, but they were not corrected in the financial statements for whatever reason. We did not have anything that originated in 2011. We did have a couple of errors that originated from 2010 that carried over and affected the 2011 financial statements, but they were not significant in our opinion. So this brings us to the next slide, which Mr. Barker covered somewhat in his presentation, but on page 20, the CAFR is our audit report, and the third paragraph on that page is what we can refer to as a clean opinion, in which we say we believe that your financial statements are fairly presented. In addition to that audit report, we will be issuing 3 more reports or letters in the near future. The first report is required by government auditing standards. Government auditing standards is simply an extra layer of auditing standards as applicable to governmental audits. And one of the things it requires is that we issue a report that discusses internal control and compliance with laws and regulations. We are not expressing an opinion on internal control in that report or an opinion on compliance with laws and regulations, but if anything had come to our attention of significance, we would be pointing it out in those letters. And at this point, we do not expect to have any comments in that letter, the report for government auditing standards. There's also another report that's specific to federal and state financial assistance that you receive. And we are required to audit and look at certain major programs as part of the audit. For federal purposes, Section 8 is by far the largest major program that we look at, and there are some others. And on the state side, the airport improvement grant is also one of the major programs that we look at. We are not expressing an opinion on internal control in that report. We do express an opinion on your compliance with laws and regulations are applicable to those particular grants. At this point, we are anticipating expressing a clean opinion in that report as well. And then the last report that we issue is just a management letter that's required by the Auditor General of the state of Florida. There's a lot of required content that we have to cover in that letter. And one of the items addressed in that letter is addressing whether or not the city is experiencing deteriorating financial conditions. It's something we look at every year, and this year we do not have anything in there that indicates that the city is in fact experiencing deteriorating financial conditions. Now, there is something in your presentation that includes some indicators that we are required by the Auditor General to look at each year that helps us make that determination. So that presentation is in your agenda package, and we encourage you to look at that and certainly contact staff and us as auditors as well if you would have any questions on that. The one comment we do have that is included in the management letter is covered here on the next slide. It's something we have talked to you about in the past regarding your management information systems. Because of the lack of staff size, there is a need for cross-training and periodic rotation of duties. The ability to do that has been limited due to staff size, and that is not uncommon even for an organization the size of the city of Pensacola. And we're certainly not recommending that you go out and hire additional staff and create additional positions just to remove the comment and create an ideal control environment. But we do recommend that cross-training, as it can be done, continue, and that until cross-training can be fully done and all these duties can be segregated, that you continue to monitor the controls and just make sure that it does not worsen. But once again, we're not recommending that you make any change at this point. Simply be aware of the condition. That covers our presentation briefly, so once again, I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have about anything specifically.
Anybody from this side? Any comments from the audience? Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Mr. President,
Oh, thank you.
I have a question, but I guess it wouldn't be to the auditors, but probably to Mr. Reynolds or Mr. Barker regarding the management information system, rotation of duties. What are we doing about that, and is that going to be improved, or who's in charge of that?
Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can assure council that MIS is one of the top things on this particular individual's list for the future. Not only the issues in regards to proper staff training and cross-training, but also hopefully putting systems in place and policies in place and an organization in place that will allow us to increase our efficiencies and better our customer service.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I guess my next response, follow-up to that is, I would like to see something reported to us, maybe in writing, periodically letting us know, you know, what you're doing or to achieve the goals you just stated.
Yes, ma'am, and I hope to have some news for council. I've shared with council already the H2 consultants report on the organization, and we're in the process of putting together a plan to move forward to achieve the objectives that are outlined in that report.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Myers, I'll tell you that in the 5 CAFRs that I've been through, this is the one thing that comes up every year. It's nothing new. So the situation in MIS has worsened over time, but it's nothing new. Okay, anything else from, yes, sir?
Mike Kilmer, 2818 West Jackson Street. And this is probably also, guys, I hope you don't mind, maybe a question for the city pertaining to Larry Johnson, what he brought up. The $2.4 million, which is going to be, I guess, negotiated for the pension funds, it looks like, is that about 20 to 25% of the general fund? And is it about double the unassigned general fund? Please excuse me if I'm speaking out of ignorance. It looked like the general fund was about $10.5 million, and about $1.5 million was unassigned. I'm just trying to get a more clear understanding of what...
It does run about 25% of the general fund budget, and it's going to be even a larger percentage this year unless we find some way to deal with that. And I can tell you that the last few years it's consumed 100% of the ad valorem tax base, 100%, and this year it'll be higher than that. There won't be enough property taxes to cover that shortfall. So unless we do something.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Item number 3, sir.
Actually, at this point, Mr. President, if we could go ahead and bring forward discussion item number 10, which is the external audit selection process.
Okay, sure.
And the reason for that is obviously we have our auditors currently here.
Right.
And if there are some questions in regards to that, you know, I want council to have the ability to ask them as well. If you'll look at item number 10, then it's a discussion memo in regards to the external audit selection. I won't go through this in detail, but essentially the time frame is coming up for where we need to make our selection for our next auditors. That contract expires with this particular audit, and frankly, to ensure that we have a contract in place for a timely audit for fiscal year 2012, we need to have a signed agreement no later than 1 June. Therefore, the options are either we continue with our current auditing firm or we go out for an open bid to determine who would be the next firm. And essentially what we need at this point is some direction from council. We don't need that today, but we do need it relatively soon. And so we can get, if the decision is made to go outside, we can go ahead or to another firm, we can go ahead and put that RFQ together and move forward.
Would council like to deal with it today?
It's our chance. It's our chance to deal with it now. I mean, or at least start the discussion, if it makes sense.
Sure. Well, but I mean, we could resolve it today as well.
Sure.
If we put a motion on the floor. How long has Saltmarsh been doing it?
Mr. Barker, can you?
This particular contract was for 5 years. With this audit, it ends that 5-year contract. Saltmarsh has indicated to me that they would be willing to extend the contract, and it's up to council to decide what they would like to do.
Okay. Well, we'll let you know well before June 1st then. No one seems...
Well,
okay.
I'll add a comment. I guess I just was reading the agenda item, and it says that there's a recommendation that from the best practices that we should do a full-scale competitive process every 5, or whatever, at the end of the term. And I'm not meaning that in any disrespect to Saltmarsh and all of the work they've done, but I think for... you know, in the best interest of an open government, it's probably a good idea to look to do a new competition.
Ms. Myers.
And I agree with Councilwoman Pratt. I think that it would be a good idea to have a competitive process. And I'm willing to make that motion.
I'll second it, I guess. If there's a formal motion in there.
Sure. Okay, there's a motion, second. Make it a competitive process. Discussion?
Well, I think that they've done a good job, but I think that, in terms of efficiency, I think we should give the mayor some direction. He's wanting some direction, so I would urge council to take some action on this so the mayor will know one way or the other in a timely manner so that he can start the process if we choose to go for a competitive process.
All right, Mr. Reynolds.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to outline, if you look at the first paragraph of your discussion memo, you'll see what that process actually is. It consists of a committee that has sitting on it the Director of Finance, a staff member, one member of City Council, and one citizen. And then they would essentially be the committee that would be looking at any RFQs.
If we go that route, would you be willing to serve on that, Mr. Weiss?
I guess we would take a vote later. I did have a question on including this verbiage that Mr. Reynolds just read, as well as the best practices statement in the motion, if the maker of the motion wishes to do so, to be very clear on what we intend to do.
I'll consider a friendly amendment if that's the process. Could you restate your friendly amendment?
The process to select the city's external auditor by a selection committee consisting of finance director, one staff member, one member of city council, and one citizen. And that this RFQ process is to follow the best practices as established by the GFOA. I think we can abbreviate.
Okay. That acceptable to you?
That's acceptable.
Okay. Any more discussion from the audience? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. We need to go back to item 2 just for a moment. We need to have a motion to accept the CAFR.
So moved.
So moved. Second? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. All right, sir.
Mr. President, number 3 on our list of agenda items is law enforcement trust fund purchases. The recommendation is that City Council approve a supplemental budget resolution for enhancements to city law enforcement in the amount of $100,300 from the Law Enforcement Trust Fund.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion? Audience? All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Item 4.
The fourth item on the agenda, Mr. President, is an open container ordinance revision. The recommendation is that City Council approve the amendment of Section 7, TAC 4, TAC 14 to allow a law enforcement officer to issue a civil citation in lieu of making an arrest or issuing a notice to appear for violations of the City Open Containers Ordinance.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion?
Question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, modifying this rule to make it have the officers issue a citation versus a ticket. Does that take into account the level of intoxication? Is that considered? I mean, a person may have an open container, but he may be about wanged out. But then the officer would have to use his discretion at that time, whether or not it's just someone having a cold beer or someone who's had several beers and are at the point of being inebriated. Is that what I'm reading in this? In other words, that the officer uses his discretion in terms of whether or not to issue a citation versus an arrest or something along those lines?
That's the way it would sound to me, is that, you know, it's up to the officer on the spot there.
Okay, and we've tweaked this down through the years. That will cover events like gallery night and those kinds of things. Is it waived on gallery night?
Well, we just passed an ordinance that allows for that exception.
Okay.
Specialty.
Yeah, for
That's where
special
I'm
events, yeah.
trying to make sure we're covering all bases.
Mr. President, if I may, Councilman Gerald, you are correct. This allows the officer on the scene some discretion. It allows him the opportunity to put a corrective measure in force that is not a criminal violation. But it is the officer on the scene that will have that added flexibility, and those things will be taken into consideration. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone from the audience? Yes, sir.
I hope you guys aren't tired of hearing from me, but I would like to suggest that the officer already has the discretion of not arresting him or her and telling them to go away, or arresting them. And this kind of adds a third option, which could bring a little bit of income into the city. Is that correct?
I wouldn't think that it would be enough to generate any significant income for the city.
I'm not saying it would be $1 million ticket.
Yeah.
If I could respond, my understanding is that in most cases, the officers don't want to arrest someone for an open container. Right. But in this way, we're able to give a punishment for disobeying the law. And this is just one other tool we have that's sort of a more palatable punishment to most of us, as opposed to, you know, hauling you off to jail for just having an open drink. But you should be expected to obey the law, and this is a way to say, no, there's some, just making sure that our punishment meets the violation, and so it's not to gain revenue, but it's just another way.
I wasn't saying it was to gain revenue.
To ensure that the punishment meets the crime.
So are you guys saying that it's an insignificant revenue, citations are an insignificant source of revenue for the city then?
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Yes, sir. Dr. Wu.
I think one way of looking at it is, would the person rather be arrested and taken to jail or get a citation?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I came off like I disagree.
No. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you have the right to do that. All I'm saying is we're giving people the option of a penalty, but one not as severe as one that had existed.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. So I apologize if I came off wrong.
No need for you to apologize.
Okay.
No need
Thank
to.
you, guys.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Any more discussion? No. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Number 5.
Mr. President, the fifth item on the agenda is proposed park and facilities naming or renaming guidelines. The recommendation is that City Council approve the proposed naming and renaming guidelines developed by the Neighborhood Services Department and adopted by the Parks and Recreation Board.
Move to approve.
There's a motion. Need a second? It fails for lack of second. Item number 6.
Mr. President, item number 6 is allocation of funding for Roger Scott Tennis Court repairs. The recommendation is that City Council approve a supplemental budget resolution for the repair and resurfacing of 12 hard surface tennis courts at the Roger Scott Tennis Center at an estimated cost of $50,000.
What's your pleasure?
Move to approve.
This motion? Second? Discussion? Audience? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Number 7, sir.
Mr. President, the seventh item on the agenda is Lifeguard Air Ambulance Incorporated Consent and Estoppel Agreement. The recommendation is that City Council authorize the mayor to execute written consent of the Lifeguard Air Ambulance Incorporated Consent and Estoppel Agreement as provided under its lease and operating agreement with the City of Pensacola.
Move the approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion from the audience. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Number 8, sir.
Mr. President, the 8th item on the agenda is resolution urging members of the Florida State Legislature to support the adoption of Senate Bill 206. The recommendation is that City Council approve a resolution urging members of the Florida Legislature to support the adoption of Senate Bill 206. Excuse me.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and second, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Can I get a brief description of that bill, please? I apologize. I'm not real familiar with it, and I didn't get a chance to review that. Thank you.
Certainly, Councilman Johnson. Essentially what this bill does is, as Mr. Messer has so eloquently put out in his memo to Council, there is no actual right of currently in the state of Florida for citizens to vocally participate on issues before most council meetings in the state. This would allow that right. It would give them the right at some point, not necessarily in the same meeting, but at least allow them the opportunity at some point to be heard on particular items on an agenda.
My memory has been jarred now. Thank you. Yeah. Hey, you won't fix my computer.
So I can't call you a jarhead, though, right?
No, you can if you want to. Everyone else does.
Okay. Ms. Myers.
Yes, I would like to speak in favor of this. While our policies and procedures offer much broader opportunities for citizens to speak, the bill does set forth minimal requirements throughout the state. So I think it adopts some good guidelines that are in the bill so that things are more clear. I mean, if the council chose to just go with the guidelines set forth in 206, I mean, we could if it passed. But I'm in favor of it. So I hope council will vote to adopt it, or to send a resolution to our Florida delegation in support of it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone from the audience? Mr. Gerald.
Thank you, Mr. President. And of course, that leaves our procedures intact. We won't have to go back over this again. Our procedures will stay intact, and you know it helps, I believe, to continue to improve our relationships with our local public, and it's important that we maintain that relationship between us, because oftentimes they may bring up things that none of us may be thinking about at the time, but I believe they enjoy that opportunity, and that we should not tamper with that, and we will move on hopefully in the future as smooth as possible. And as Ms. Meyer said, we'll go ahead and send a resolution to Tallahassee, and they have 100. The last trip I was down there, and I asked the question about the House of Representatives, and it's over 100 members. And I said, how long do you guys' meetings go on? And they said, 12 to 16 hours. And I said, okay. That killed my interest in heading to Tallahassee for a long conversation. But if that's the way they like to do it, and now they want to throw in the public coming in, they'll be there a good 18 to 20 hours. But it's okay with me if that's how they want to do it. No problem. Thank you.
All right, so, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, one other question, and I apologize. I remember the memo, but I can't remember exactly all of it. But, Mr. Messer, will this go, if we support this, if we send this resolution and support this bill, is this over and above current policy that we have in place now? Do you understand that question? I mean, we're already doing this, correct? I mean, our policy already establishes this, so.
Sure, I'll answer that
Okay.
question, but the most important question is, can you be called a jarhead? And the answer is no, you can't.
Okay.
And secondly, you're correct. Our regulation will stay intact. This is not over and above it. This is in fact less than the accommodation we make to citizens.
That's kind of where I was going. I kind of thought that, and.
But our procedures remain intact, and for whatever value this bill has, it has value. But our procedures are over and above this.
Right.
Thank you. I should have known better than to say that with two Marines sitting up here at the head table. So, Okay, Dr. Pratt.
I was just going to respond to Councilman Gerald's comment about the legislature. The legislature is not imposing this upon themselves, just like they didn't impose sunshine upon themselves. So they will continue to meet without the public input during their meetings. Just so you were aware that it's not going to make their meetings any different.
Okay. Anyone else from the committee? The audience? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That
Nay.
Oh, oh, no, okay. You just want to have that vote, extra vote on Thursday night, don't you?
So I don't want to get home to watch that Duke Florida State game in time, so I
Okay, that
as well be
passes
there.
8-1.
Thanks.
Okay. Discussion item, strategic planning. Item number 11.
Mr. President, this is essentially been placed on the agenda at the request of Councilman Gerald's, and I had asked the patience of the committee, the council, to have staff put together all the information in regards to the former strategic planning processes to allow you to have the opportunity to look that over prior to it being brought forward for discussion. I sent that out to the council, I believe, early last week, if I remember correctly. And so now it is available to start the discussion on strategic planning.
Well, I had dinner with the chief of staff on Thursday night, and it was just remarkable how he was able to rattle off the strategic plans that we had adopted before we changed government, and the number of things that Mayor Hayward has been able to accomplish that specifically addresses those. And it's just boom, 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 boom. It's like a one-man city council, you know. And so I was just real proud to hear that. Okay. Mr. Geralds.
Yes. In addition to that, and you sort of touched on it, but as I reviewed those strategic plans, it became evident to me that, as you just indicated, a lot of what the mayor is doing are things that we had in a strategic plan. However, as has been indicated, the new charter puts us in a different role and a different position. In other words, there were some things out in our strategic plan that we wanted to see happen in the city of Pensacola. And with the change of the charter, it actually puts the mayor in the role to actually carry out what we indicated in the first place. Mm-hmm. And as I began to listen at our meetings and try to get a grip on what we're doing, in fact, we are in agreement with the moves because they were thoughts and ideas and plans that we sat and put together, and I believe 7 of us were in on that particular session. It allows us to look at what the mayor is doing, what the goals are, and where sometimes we get hung up in debating and pushing back and forth about what he's doing and how it's going. And when I look back at it, it became apparent, as I said, that what is happening is that the goals and objectives that we set forth are actually being carried out. And sometimes it may not appear to us that we are involved, but in fact, we are involved. We were involved in the original planning and design of those particular, code enforcement is an excellent example. What we want to do with code enforcement, I would like to see us continue to move in the plan that we had for annexation. And there is an area that I drove through today and I received a call about it over the weekend. And it depends on the placement of the city of Pensacola city limits. And what's happening, there's some guy that's a backyard mechanic, and he has about 20 cars on both sides of the street. Now, when you pass the sign on the city side, I believe there are 4 cars, 2 on each side. But in the county side, it's quite a bit of it, and they're all on the right-of-way. So if we were to eliminate that, either take it into the city or put it all into the county, and it's the corner of H, as in Harry, and Lee. If our folks want to take a look at our side of it and see what we can do to coordinate. But I do believe that we had annexation to eliminate those pockets and enclaves that exist within the city, which is something that we were planning to do. Yes, thank you. And of course, number one was to improve our relationship with the public at our public meetings, you know, creating that transparent government that we talk about. And that was the number one thing we were planning to do. So it's important to me, and hopefully it will become important to all of us, that when we have a plan, to me, a plan or goals and objectives become useless unless there is some point at which you evaluate your progress or lack thereof. So if you put together a set of plans, say here's what we're going to do, but no one ever goes back and check to see if we did it. Of course, the wastewater treatment plant was one on that list as well. So I would encourage all of us, if you haven't already reviewed it, to take a look at it, and at some point in the very near future, we may want to sit and have another strategic plan, so that not only will we as a council understand where we would like to go as a city, but the mayor will have an opportunity to see what goals and what things that we're all working on as a team. And basically that's what I would like to see us do, to work as a team, to look at what we said we were going to do, and then identify the individual who has that responsibility. And when we did the plan, the council jointly developed it, and of course it went to the city manager. But I think we've reached a point where it is important that we look at the goals, look at the objectives, look at what the mayor's doing, look at what we already agreed to, and what would be pleasing, if you will, to us to get those things solved. I believe it gives us an opportunity to work closer as a team. Thank you.
Well, I just want to thank you for even just bringing it up, Mr. Geralds, because quite frankly, I was one of those that had not looked at our strategic goals for the past year. And so it was just remarkable to me, either how much the mayor has followed ours or just how intuitive we were ahead of time, you know, to be moving the city in a direction that somebody like Mayor Hayward was going to do anyway. And
exactly.
So we may have been just a little bit ahead of the curve, but it's nice to see that the two compare so well. Ms. Myers.
Yes, I'm looking at the strategic goals right now, and I hear you saying that you had a great conversation apparently with Mr. Asmar, and he provided you with information that suggest that the city, through the mayor, is meeting some of these goals, and I hear Mr. Reynolds saying the same thing. What I would like is a report from the mayor's office listing those things that the mayor's administration is doing under each one of these items to either work toward those goals or some things that have already been achieved. For instance, encourage and facilitate educational opportunities that exceed traditional educational practices through city initiatives and collaboration with the school board, Chamber of Commerce, and other stakeholders. That's one of the goals, strategic goals. Well, what does that mean? How is that happening? What is the city doing? So I think if we could get a report from the mayor's office regarding how these goals, strategic goals, are being addressed, I think then we could look at possibly what the council can do to achieve these strategic goals. For instance, we've heard a lot about smart code. And possibly some changes in our building codes or land development codes. So some of these things the mayor alone can't do. It would have to be done by ordinance or policy. I'm thinking also about some environmental policies that I would like to see adopted in ordinances. So I think if we could get a clearer picture of what the mayor's doing and how we can fill in some gaps that need to be filled in through ordinances or policies, that would be good.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. And in a report like that, on the things that we may not have achieved, I'd like for him to include in there perhaps reasons outside of the city's control why we haven't. You talked about the school board. The superintendent of schools is pretty much, closed the door on any of that. And it's no reflection on our efforts or the mayor's, either one.
That's
It's
right.
it's a decision of his, but I think that that ought to be included as well.
That's good.
And so Mr. Gerald's is next.
I can partially answer that question for you, Ms. Myers, in that when we discussed a relationship, improving or developing a stronger relationship between the school district and the city of Pensacola, and there was some talk about each entity has its own jurisdiction and responsibilities. However, we have some instances and we have occasions and opportunities for sharing of facilities, and I believe that Ms. DeWeese had brought before a scholarship program, and I understand that the students have stepped up to sort of fill that void. And earlier today, as I had promised you, it was my first day at O.J. Sims Elementary School with the 5th graders, and I'm working with them in transition now. I do know that we have provisions here in the city of Pensacola where employees go to public schools to do mentoring of students at those schools. And when we were talking about it, we were talking about the kinds of things that looking at the opportunities to share facilities. It also included looking at abandoned buildings that are owned by the school district and the impact that it has on our community. So there are some things. We even talked about establishing an education committee of sorts so that we could work with the superintendent or his designee and look and see if we have areas in which we can work together and to work closer with the general objective of providing for an opportunity for the students in the city of Pensacola to be better prepared for the jobs that we say we want to bring, the training that they will need, and to help in any way that we can to reduce our dropout prevention rates, to work on the fact that students are completing school and able to become gainfully employed. But there are relationships between us that we need to explore. I don't know if an education committee would be the answer to it, but I would like to see us develop a closer relationship with the students of our community, because I continue to monitor and look at the reputation of our city, our ranking with other or neighboring school districts, for example, and I get tired of hearing about school district X is #1 and #2 and doing those kinds of things. And I believe that if we all decide to work together on it to see what we can do to bring our students up to the level that they need to be, and there are some exploratory opportunities to develop, to look at what we can do, and if we find that there's nothing we can do, then we could stop, even if with the scholarship program. And it's still the words that were spoken that evening still resonate in my brain. When Bill Greenhut came before council and he indicated to us that he would be willing to chair the fundraising efforts of such a committee, and it just went right over the heads of everybody. Remember when he said that?
Oh, I do.
And we blew it. We just sat there and like, what are you talking? Well, heck, this guy wants to raise the, and he's in a position to do that and to do it effectively. So if we sit down and have another strategic planning session, we can look at, and this time it'll be different in that we will have a better grip on what we do as a council and what the mayor's responsibilities are. Because when you look at the present plan, it's sort of woven in there together. So a second plan would give us a chance to pull out our rules and our policies and responsibilities versus what the mayor's, and if he carries out those things, that's fine. But as we look at downtown, it's looking better, and the wastewater treatment plant is gone. I think that's, well, code enforcement and the wastewater treatment plant are two that we really had on the list that we've really addressed in a good way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gerald. Spencer.
Thank you. I appreciate Councilwoman Myers suggesting that, or inquiring, how are we measuring this? What sort of progress is being made in a way that we can say this year, this is how far we made it on a scale of 1 to 10. And I do want to comment on two things. I think we are making progress on the SMART code, which was introduced to this new council in concept. I recall making the presentation the first month. And I look forward to that development being very much guided with Sustainable Gulf Coast 350, with their participation and their willingness to play a role. I've heard them loud and clear, and if you discuss SMART code with them, they see that as basically one of the most important frameworks that will enable them and us to change the land development code. Regarding the educational system, I just want to echo President Hall's comments. I think the mayor made a very visible sort of step, took a visible step in showing that he wanted to have a productive conversation, or to start one, with the superintendent as well as the board regarding the abandonment of facilities and properties. So I will, again, I invite the public to join me tomorrow as we discussed at our other meeting. I will be attending the February 21st meeting tomorrow. It starts at 5:30 at the J.E. Hall Center on Tahar Drive. Immediately after the invocation, I understand as a public speaker I will have 2 minutes, and I will do my best in that 2-minute time period to reiterate to the board and to the superintendent my concern. As I recall, I am not representing the council in any official capacity, but I will be there as a citizen discussing my concern, most particularly with the recent announcement of additional funding to the tune of $38 million plus for additional facilities. And so that just gave me a little more fuel for the fire. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I skipped over Ms. DeWeese.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did want to point out to council and for the two new council members, not so new now, but it did take us 14 months to get these strategic goals in place and voted on. So for the 10 months from then until the new administration, the budget as well as anything that came before council, whether it was the finance department or whatever department head was proposing that information, it had to be aligned with something within these strategic goals. So Vice, going back and getting historical data, I'm not sure how much effort would have to be put into that since we are in the middle of our budget process and each council member is making proposals within their district and we're having that conversation going forward. If possibly, it could also be related to the council strategic goals in some manner, not in some large paragraph form, but just noting, much like the 20 solutions that the mayor had put forward, what this each particular effort is working on to show the collaborative effort and to show the alignment as well with council guidelines. So I don't know if council wants to consider that instead of historical data at this point, but going forward, looking at that.
Well, I would be interested in having some of the historical data too, and it shouldn't be too big of an effort. I know that Mr. Asmar was able to just off the top of his head address several of those, and I think it could probably really be compacted, didn't have to have any big explanation on it, and probably about 2/3 of a page, that, on the biggest items that we've done. But are you saying then that everything that, I want to go back to the way we did it under manager council form of government, that each thing that comes before us, that it relates to a strategic goal?
Not necessarily the agenda items, the budget process, and it already speaks to how it aligns with the mayor's 20 solutions.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the plans are for the new budget since that was last year's format. But if there could be a sentence in there or an item that says council goals met, council goals, and say what they are within the budget as well. And that way we can align ourselves better with the allocations that are being made. Because that's, in my commentary and my efforts for district requests, I looked at that, and that will be my conversation, is how the needs of the district align with the goals of the mayor citywide. So,
Well, is that something you want to put into a motion? I think the mayor would be more than willing to do that, because if he could show how it met all the different strategic goals, it'd be harder for us to say no to it.
That's right.
exactly.
You know, so I'm not even sure it would need a
I don't think
vote, but
I'm not
but-
intending to make a motion, it's just some conversation on how it might be formatted going forward.
Mr. Reynolds was doing plenty of writing though while you were speaking, so. Mr. Gerald.
Yes, I think it would be important and fruitful for us to sit down and have another session so that we can have that discussion and clear up the directions we're going in. Because now, the more I review the charter, it gives me an opportunity to really be able to identify and to comprehend the boundaries that the new charter put in place, and to have a set of rules, because we will still be responsible to our constituents as to their desires as to how the city grows and what things they want to see happen. And it's nothing wrong with the city having its own set of rules and goals, or 20 goals or 20 plans or whatever it is, as long as we know and understand and we are clear on the boundaries and who has the responsibility for what. And I think that would help us. And before I stop talking, I wanted to say to Mr. Spencer, thank you.
It's written on this.
Mr. Spencer, that I will too be at the Hall Center tomorrow afternoon. We will be honoring a local physician, Dr. Charles Augustus, who passed recently. And the significance of Dr. Augustus was that he lived about 3 blocks from O.J. Sims Elementary School, and his children could not attend that school, and he challenged the school district in court. They prevailed, and thus the integration of O.J. Sims Elementary School. And I will be checking with Elaine to see if I can get something that from the city we could present to his family as well. There will be a reception at the Hall Center following or during actually the school board business meeting and workshop. But there are several people that are going to come down who remembered Dr. Charles Augustus and the challenge after they rode their 18-wheelers across his lawn and shot his lawn, not his lung, but his lawn, and several shots were fired into his house, and that was Pensacola then, and this is Pensacola now. But he was an excellent physician. He's also one of my fraternity brothers, so I will certainly be there at 5:30, Mr. Spencer. But I'll not comment about the superintendent and their board. But there are some properties in the city that I'm interested in that are abandoned schools. And those schools, when it comes to facilities and building and doing things, the reason I'm really fascinated by them is because of the construction that went into them. And many of those are very old buildings that were not touched by Ivan. Ivan tore up a lot of stuff in this town, but those buildings stood strong, very strong. And they're probably worth preserving and maintaining, but as we know and we all understand, there has to be open and frank dialogue between the owners and those who have desires to move the city forward. Thank you.
Dr. Pratt.
Thank you. On the topic of the goals, I will say that I felt that the process we went through to develop these was long and arduous, and I was sort of frustrated at the end that we didn't have more action items as opposed to nebulous hopes and dreams. So I'm a little reluctant to go through it again and pretty much get the same product. And one alternative I might put out there is it might be worthwhile for us to even just take the key topics and revisit them as a council, including the new council members as well, and say, okay, what do we want to focus on in this as we go forward, and what policy decisions can we push from our side as the council to get this to happen. And I'll touch a little on the education issue. And Councilman Spencer mentioned the abandoned buildings, but that really wasn't, and you mentioned the reception from the school district, But that wasn't really all what we were talking about. It was really, I remember distinctly Dr. Wu saying during our workshop, is it really the city's role to be in education? And I said, well, if it's not, then we need to close the libraries and community centers and the sports facilities, because that's all education. And so so I guess that was a lot of what we were talking about with the education is what can we do, what creative things can we as a city do to further education, whether it's, and the Parks and Rec Department has been doing some of this, where they've been doing innovative programming at the community centers. And but could we go further? Could we do a municipal charter school or any of these other things? And I think it would be valuable for us to set aside some time as we approach the budget season or such, to look at each of these separately, maybe at the end of a council meeting or a small workshop. But I don't want to spend a lot of effort doing the huge strategic planning to then have something that we forget to refer to again. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wasn't going to speak on this, but a couple things came up talking about the school board, and I hope that one of my fellow council persons will bring this forward maybe tomorrow night if they have the opportunity, realizing they only have 2 minutes to speak when we allow 4 minutes at city council meeting on Thursday night. So if they allowed 4 minutes, I'm sure they would have an ample time, but with 2 minutes might not. But one thing that, as I hear this and talking about the school board, I want to remind my council people that will be there tomorrow that we had a discussion about a month ago about an overlay district here. The school board showed up, actually representatives of the school board. We also had some discussion about ECUA. It was implied that we had not included, I believe, as I remember correctly, it was implied that we didn't include them in the discussions of this overlay district. But recently I read in the newspaper about these schools being replaced. One of them is in my district, AK Suter. And unfortunately, I wasn't notified by the school board of any activity in that regard as a new school going in or additions, et cetera. I had read about it in the News Journal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Myers.
Well, I agree with Councilman Gerald's and Councilwoman Pratt and others who've expressed a need to have a meeting to discuss these goals in more detail. I think that would be very helpful. So I support that and look forward to it.
Mr. Gerald's.
Yes, quickly, and I'll let go of this for now. But I'll just come right to the point. And in reference to the comments that Dr. Pratt made, and it was really the facilitator that led us down the dark path. So in the future, we'll pick a better facilitator. No, nothing against the guy that facilitated that meeting, but I would have done it somewhat differently. So when we decide to do this, and we can decide it at another meeting in the very near future, but I think that we have our budget preparation responsibilities in front of us now that will require our absolute attention, and at sometime in the very near future we can get together and have that kind of a session so that we can look at the things that we're really concerned about, document them, and continue working our efforts to make sure that they actually happen. And as I said earlier, there's nothing wrong with evaluating our plan to see if we were successful or not. It's very important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that just about wraps us up on this. Thank you for your input. On consent agenda items, for Thursday night, items 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7, and 10.
Need a motion?
Yeah, need a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? On favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, there's 4 information items. Anybody? Yes, sir. Mr. Gerald's.
Yes. On item number 14.
Yes.
And on February 28th, I believe that's next Tuesday, there will be a meeting on the second floor. This says chambers, but I understand it's going to be on the second floor of City Hall to talk about the disparity study and to gather information from the public, women-owned businesses, about their experience with the city's purchasing and contracting department. And I, once again, will encourage council to get involved, to listen to what's going on, because we're spending $250,000 to get this information. And what we need to do as a council is be prepared to develop an ordinance if we need to, just be prepared to understand and to know exactly what we're going to do with this information. I think that's an awful lot of money for someone to tell me something that I pretty much already know, but nevertheless, I'm a vote on council. Couldn't stop it, couldn't control it. And I did vote for it in the beginning, but after I looked at what was going on and Mr. Smith came up and explained to us what he's really looking at, I began to sort of hesitate. But in any case, at 6 o'clock on February 28th, from 6 until 8 p.m., and I guess I'll read what's in front of me, and it will be held in council chambers, we will hear what the public has to say about the city of Pensacola and its business and procurement practices. So if all of you or any of you have any time on your hand, you might want to come by and just listen. And as I was going through the MGT book the other night, there is a clause in there that indicates that we get a monthly update. Y'all read that little book, it says a monthly update, so we need to be hearing from this guy, and we're not. So, for that kind of money, he's got to do the job. Don't be half-stepping, do all of it. So we might want to call him and find out about our monthly updates so that we don't get a balloon report at the end. But for $250,000, you got to show me, if it said daily, I'd expect to see you. For those kind of bucks. Thank you.
Ms. Myers?
Yes, Mr. President, is that something you could do, is ask for a monthly update from our disparity study folks? Or how do we do that?
Well, it depends on what kind of update you're looking for. Are you looking for something that's written, or a presentation like what was given before?
Well, I don't know. I'm just following up on Councilman Gerald's request and trying to figure out how we would get such a report.
Yes, Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mayberger can address that issue.
Members of council, we will get a monthly update for you. You may recall that we received an oral update on January. That was at MGT's expense. It was not required as part of the contract. They did that as a favor to us. I will get you a written update on the progress of the MGT report as soon as I can.
And then monthly after that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that okay? All right. Dr. Pratt.
A different item, unless anyone
Okay,
has
go ahead.
anything. Item 12, the complete streets. I guess when we discussed it last time, the request was, or the council's motion was to have the attorney review it and bring that ordinance that I had proposed back on the agenda. And the reason I asked for it in that manner is we can't direct staff to do anything, and we've heard from people, and we've talked about it, and I guess I'm getting frustrated that we haven't done anything. I mean, at minimum, I spoke with Mr. Reynolds. I was hoping that to have at least the my faux ordinance on the agenda for us to take shots at, because I mean, I'm not wedded to it in any way, but I guess I was wondering if, to some extent, if we want to take our role as policymakers seriously, we need to start talking about, well, what direction do we want to go with this complete streets, rather than saying, well, we'd like for the mayor to come up with a plan. It should be our responsibility as the council to say, this is the direction. And I'll say that the ordinance that I had written out, and if anyone wants I printed a few copies if anyone didn't bring theirs back, addressed it in a little different way than the memo. And the memo was mostly about the LDC, Land Development Code, and design guidelines. And And to some extent, the request I put into the ordinance was reflecting some of our goals, which were, that we were just talking about, which was really to come up with a plan for how do we connect our community. And because it doesn't make much sense for us to go and say, oh, well, when we rework some little random street off to the side, that street needs to have bike paths. We need to talk about how to best target our dollars. And so I was hoping that the council would be able to weigh in on their policy views so that we could direct the planning and drafting of such an ordinance. And so I don't know if anyone had taken the time to consider the ordinance I had distributed, and within the context of the mayor's comments as well, if anyone had further comments on that.
Spencer.
You want to go?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Spencer. I have followed the Complete Streets. I think we've kind of been aligned on that since we both came on council. And I see many municipalities changing their policy statements and also trying to effect change on a federal level. One of the things that if you go to the Complete Streets, it's completestreets.org, it talks about having a workshop and engaging your community. We're having so many different conversations on what's going on, and they're all productive. I think like the 350 is kind of an action plan. They have some actions that we can take once we have policy in place. So they align, but they're not at all the same. And I know that even smart code will impact this. So I think a continued conversation. I don't know if there's any cost to this workshop. They do send experts, but I don't know if they're grant-funded experts that are already being paid to do this work. I don't know if you'd research that part of it, and that would maybe be a logical next step. I'm happy to send a few emails and see what's going on and report back on Thursday about what this process would be, because they lay out the foundations of what Complete Streets are and talk about policy development and then how to implement that policy. If that's what council's wanting to hear about or engage the community in at this point.
Where would you want to present it, during presentations or
Just a
or
quick
new
update
business?
that it is this cost, and I'll make a motion to put that on the agenda for next time. Obviously, if we're expending any dollars, to have someone come and bring the community together. It talks about 30 stakeholders and expertise, so that would involve staff commitment as well. We don't want to be doing this out in a bubble over here. It needs to use the expertise of staff. So I'd be willing to do that.
Sure. How about new business then? Sir.
I want to certainly let Councilwoman Pratt know I endorse your action, and what I appreciate is you're trying to put something up there in the air that we've got to catch, and again, so I don't want you to think any delays from on this council's part is an obstacle, an intentional obstacle. So I want to see it accomplished. I do appreciate Councilwoman DeWeese's comment about a workshop, but I like the idea as we have this discussion of creating a deadline. And I do want to tell you I didn't redline your ordinance yet. I did review it, and then I was beginning to review what a movement in Denver is. It's called Walk Denver, and they specifically mentioned the importance of the complete streets, most particularly in establishing walkable destinations that are within a walkable distance in order to make that complete streets. And certainly, I know you were touching on that, but I'm in favor of establishing a deadline. I know that those typically will get me to take action, a self-inflicted deadline, but I wasn't prepared today to move forward with that. But I don't want to see it linger either.
Yes.
And I guess I didn't ever intend for us to be voting on an ordinance today, but I knew last week you had never seen it before, but today we would have, had it been on the agenda, been able to have an informed discussion about our policy plans. And I guess, I think to some extent this raises the question of how we as a council want to act to take our role as making policy. Do we want to simply just request that the mayor's staff just draft things whenever the mayor is willing to let them take that time? Or do we want to take a more proactive role and say, okay, these are the things, here's what we want, and here's the deadline? Because we can't give them a deadline. So we can give the clerk and the attorney instructions. And so otherwise, as Councilman Spencer mentioned, there's no other way for us to put a deadline than to just start saying, okay, this is the ordinance we want to do, and then if the mayor's staff has opinions, they need to raise their hand and say, ho, that's crazy, or great, we're all on the same page. And I guess this is the only way I understand for us to actually move things forward rather than wait on whenever the mayor gets around to addressing some of our goals as a council.
Well, perhaps we can make something specific then on Thursday night then. Yes, sir.
Mr. President, thank you. First of all, let me be clear. I think that there's no doubt that the mayor shares the same goals as everybody here. I'd like to talk a little bit about the role of staff. This city employs a professional staff for a reason. Our job is to take a look at all the different ideas, frankly, that whether it's the mayor or whether it's council or whether it's citizens, and essentially go through a vetting process to determine whether or not those particular ideas are valid, whether there's some unintended consequences that might come up through the process, and try to prevent elected bodies, whether it be the United States Senate or whether it be at a city level, from making decisions that ultimately are not in the best interest of the organization. And we need to keep that clear, because that's the role of staff here as well. And I certainly understand Councilwoman Pratt's frustration, but part of what I need to ensure is that we as an organization as a whole, as Councilman Geralds had stated so eloquently earlier, working together as a team, and all pull in the same direction. The mayor is in favor of this type of proposal. And so the key is how we get there. And I would recommend that council, on a situation where that the mayor and his staff are going to be working on this issue, pass a resolution recommending that you want action on a particular date. You would like to see action. Staff will work towards that, and we'll bring a proposal forward to have council look at. And yes, it will be a proposal that the mayor will have signed off on. Again, that is his role in this form of government.
Well, thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Mr. President, I think this is such an important issue. I don't want us to lose momentum on this issue. I've been coming down to City Council for years harping about this very issue, complete streets, because streets and how our infrastructure is how either people get included or excluded from being able to participate in society. Obviously referring to persons with disabilities. But this morning, when I drove down Burgess Road around 7 o'clock, I saw around 8, 9 students standing in a ditch waiting for a school bus. We need to address our infrastructure, our streets, and prioritize where we want the emphasis to be placed when it comes to addressing issues like sidewalks. I noticed the county is putting in a new sidewalk on Lanier that runs from Langley to Tony, then down Tony to Sanders, in order to allow students to walk more safely to school. But we as a city have to do more. So this is a very important issue. The infrastructure of this city, making this a walkable, bicycle-friendly, pedestrian-friendly community, for me is a top priority. And I don't want this momentum that we have going, thanks to Councilwoman Pratt bringing forth a proposed ordinance. I don't want us to lose the momentum on this.
Well, it sounds like what Mr. Weiss is going to be doing between now and Thursday, and it sounds like we've got a commitment on the part of the mayor that this will start moving forward. Just warn everybody, though, that when we implement this, there's a price tag that comes with it, and we've got to figure out where to get the dollars to do it with. Okay. Any more discussion? Okay. Council communications and new business. Committee of the Whole agenda request. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
One item that I would like to see us do is to go ahead and put it on our agenda to set the date, time, and location of a strategic planning session so that all of what I'm hearing this afternoon can be laid out on the table and we can have a discussion about it at a time when we are not dealing with other city business and city matters. Just to spend that time to really...
on the strategic goals?
Yes.
Okay.
The things that, what Mr. Reese is talking about, Dr. Pratt, Mr. Spencer. Before we start developing ordinances, we need to look at what we're talking about doing. And once we identify those things and clear that up, then we can go to the next step and follow the pattern of doing what we said we were going to do in an orderly fashion versus tossing it around the room and throwing out an ordinance. Let's see what the pros and cons of what the ideas that have come to the table this afternoon. Let's investigate and thoroughly review the process and see if it fits what our desires are. And once we do that in a closed session, the public certainly can be invited, but in a kind of a closed session with the objectives and the strategic planning being the reason for our meeting, and we can iron those things out.
How long would you suggest for that meeting?
Well, it took us one day. We had lunch and we battered each other pretty good for a day.
Okay, so you're looking at...
Good 7 or 8 hours.
So you're looking for a full day and...
a full day, and I think we sort of broke after we had beaten each other down tremendously, and it was just time to go home.
Right.
But we know what we're going into, we know what we have to do, and it would be a good way to spend that time ironing out the differences, and then everybody will have clear direction. Would be my way of
Would you prefer to do it here at City Hall, or like we did our strategic goals before over at East Pensacola Heights or some other community center?
We can find a place that's basically free of interruptions and those kinds of things, and I would recommend Cole's Wings and Things for lunch. I seem to like that place for some reason.
Okay.
But I think that would be the approach, and that way we can get some things out on the table, and certainly the mayor would be welcome if he decided to come by and throw a brick in the window or something, but we can do it.
Dr. Pratt?
I was just wanting clarification. I know when we did our strategic planning previously, we had the facilitator, and it was all of those SWOT analysis, whatever it was that I'm not a good strategic planner. I find that stuff sort of cheesy and annoying. But is the intent to have a outside facilitator, or would it be, let's take up our existing goals and refine them?
I think, personally, I think that all grown enough and familiar enough with those goals and what we did before. There's two that weren't part of that process. I'm confident it wouldn't take them long to join in the discussion. I'm not looking to rewrite, the Holy Scripture here is just look at what we want to tweak and add.
Yeah, and not cutting you off, but when I have things that I have to do, I make a list. And as I complete the different tasks, I put a line through that, and I know where I'm going, and it helps me to stay on track. And that might be a good idea, just to look at what we had and those things that we have completed or things that still need work. And once we understand clearly whose yard it's in, so to speak, and then we can, if we want to add some new ones, if someone else, and I've heard a couple of new ones that you folks might want to consider. But we'll eliminate that list, narrow it down, and those things that still need work could remain on the list and we could add to it or leave it like it is. But it gives us a kind of a way to operate that, well, it's easy for me to understand. I don't like to complicate things. So if we can lay it out, solve those things that we can, and get rid of those things we cannot solve, and that'll be a healthy way for us to do that.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a COW agenda request, and that is, I have spoke publicly about Mr. Townsend, Vice President Townsend. He's not here today, and my desire to have the tennis courts that are being built at Legion Field named after him, and I would like to put that on the agenda. I know earlier we had an issue about renaming, and I'm glad that it failed, because I think that Mr. Townsend is very deserving of this. I've sat on council with him for 3+ years, and him and I have got into some pretty heated discussions about different things, but I think that because of his efforts, this issue didn't go away. And this issue, it happened, and he went out and dealt with the county commissioner and was able to find some other funds. And because of his efforts, I believe that this issue happened. So I would like to see that we name these courts after Mr. Townsend. I think that it's an appropriate thing to do, and I'd like to hear comments from others. I know the Roger Scott Tennis Facility is named after someone, and I'm not sure what Mr. Scott did. I believe he was back in city government back in the 60s, but I think it would be very appropriate if this council would consider this and do this in honor of Mr. Townsend. I'd like other thoughts, but I would like to have either that on the agenda, and I'm not sure, since we didn't act on the earlier issue on renaming, how we do this. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. I would support that.
What's that? It's my turn to speak?
It is.
First of all, we did not act on the agenda item today to modify the way that we do name facilities, streets, and those kinds of things after individuals who have made a significant contribution in our society. The rules now, that since we did not change them, he would have to be dead before we could name it after him. And that's pretty much what it states now. Or if he's still alive, once you are a council member, it's indicated somewhere in there, but it would have to be 4 years after you have sat on the council. But on the other hand, Mr. Cecil T. Hunter is still alive, and the Hunter Pool is still named after him. And we did that, I believe, they did that before I joined council. But I don't know if we would vote to name the tennis courts after Mr. Townsend, and I would want the resource center named after me. So I'm gonna tell you right now, so if you're thinking anything, because when I fought the battle to get the West Side Library in place, and when there was an election, and a letter had come from one of my 6th grade teacher who is still alive, recommending that of all the work that I did to get the West Side branch named after me, and she received a letter indicating that that request was denied. So if council is in a kumbaya, lovey-dovey mood, if you want to name the tennis courts, and I can vote for that, but then I will have to insist that the resource center that's to be built in Woodland Heights be named after John Geralds, who has been on the council for more than 12 years.
Thank you, Mr. Gerald. Ms. Myers.
Well, I've been listening to all of these plans we have for meetings and so forth, And, you know, it would be a lot easier if we had a staff person who could coordinate our meetings. And so I would like for that item to be placed on the agenda for an update. Because, you know,
The subcommittee was to meet today, but I know Councilman Townsend didn't have time to review, but I'm sure we'll get our acts in gear and meet sometime this week to be able to give some recommendation back.
Yeah, we were contacted by staff and the meeting was canceled.
okay, so at the next committee of the whole,
Imminent.
you should have done your homework.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any council requests to them? Oh, sorry.
I have something on that item, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
I looked at the 12 resumes, and I didn't see or find what I was looking for. However, I did notice that some of the applicants applied the first time around. And the first time around, several of them did not make the first cut. So I'm wondering to myself, why are we looking at them again? They didn't make the first cut the first time, they reapplied, and we're looking at them again. And it occurred to me, you know, why not Elaine? If we're going to continue to do this, why not Elaine Major? She does it anyway, she's doing it now, and has been for the last 30 or so years. And we keep looking, and like my mom used to say, we don't see the forest for the trees. So we're going to go around and around in this thing again. She's the interim person now, is that correct? And some of those applications that and resumes that we looked at before who did not make the first cut, so looking at them again, what's different about it? Nothing to me, nothing that I could identify. So I don't know, let's have that discussion on the next agenda. But at some point, we can solve this problem. This is a solvable problem.
Mr. Weiss, you can put your sunglasses away.
I know, I just looked. I'd offered to keep them out in hopes that I would need them at the end of the meeting.
Okay, are there any council requests of the mayor's office?
No, I still have a
I'm sorry.
agenda.
I think Mr. Reynolds wanted to speak to.
I think he let it.
Did you want?
I'm good.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
It really is my time? All right. I would like to put on the agenda vacant land management. I'm looking at a program in Philadelphia that I think can help several of our blighted neighborhoods.
So you're going to have something to present or to discuss?
I would like, yes.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Okay, Spencer.
I might even try my hand at ordinance writing.
Not too hard.
No.
Okay.
Just a point of order that our rules do state that it needs to be a vote of council for agenda items to be made.
Okay, all right.
Just to keep with the rules.
For next week, or next committee of the whole meeting, then we'll discuss setting a date, time, location for strategic goals.
I'll make a motion that we
Go ahead.
that we place on the agenda the topic of setting a time and place to discuss our strategic goals.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Item number 2 is naming the tennis courts at Legion Field after Ronald Townsend.
I so move.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion.
Under the
To discuss it.
Yes, sir.
Under the current rules, can we do that?
Mr. Reynolds.
Mr. President, I was going to offer my services in finding the answer to that question for council, and I'll have that for you. I'll have that for you tomorrow. I'll
Okay.
email you out on it.
Thank you.
The motion is just to place it on the agenda, not to take action on it tonight. Or it's just, the motion is just to place it on the agenda.
Right.
So Mr. Reynolds can bring whatever information he has at that time.
Okay, good. Okay, yes, sir.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I was going to vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Going to have an update on the council executive.
I'll move that issue be placed on the agenda.
Second.
Motion and second discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. And Mr. Spencer wants to facilitate a discussion and perhaps a presentation on vacant land management. I'll move that.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I just had one question, if we could also address the opportunity for land swapping in other areas of the city, if we're trying to repopulate or get rid of the missing teeth downtown, the possibility of land swapping with outlying properties.
I don't know that I need
Could we make that a separate, because my presentation
Is it already a
is,
presentation? Okay. I'll bring it up.
well, I mean, that takes it
I'll
to
just
a
bring it up.
whole different level.
Okay.
Not that it's not a bad idea.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously.